Hello, it's the 21st of April 2020. This is Roberto Capodieci. I'm here with Barton Johnson from Texas. He left the guns home today. I left the spaghetti home, so we can get started. Now, we've been working hard in this blockchain that is ZooBC, which is a pretty cool project with a lot of interesting functionalities. One of these functionalities is the distributed storage. So the blockchain takes snapshots of the current state of the blockchain, and each node saves the current snapshot, so all the nodes have that last snapshot. But then the snapshot is cut in slices, and as it becomes old, nodes can eliminate part of these slices and keep only a redundant set along all the nodes, so that people can always rebuild the snapshot. So we have a decentralized storage. We were thinking also in ways to implement decentralized application. There are no smart contracts, but there are actually applications. So subset of nodes, they have a server running with particular functionalities. They can run virtual machines, actual virtual machine with the software, right? But this will give that subset of node particular good functionalities. A transaction can have a specific attachment for one particular application. The metadata upper part of the transaction with a big fee is managed like a normal transaction along the blockchain. The bottom part with a heavy load, which is saved in the centralized storage, is only processed by the node that have that application, right? So in the moment that we were so annoyed by this public social network that censor people, and F doesn't stay for the bad word, this is for the D. And we were thinking, let's do a decentralized social network on ZooBC blockchain. Well, we needed, first of all, to start with a decentralized web server, which means also decentralized DNS, etc., okay? And this is not an application that runs in a subset of nodes. I do believe that this is an application that should run in the full blockchain, because it has a very particular difference from an application that is a subset application. I said, okay, let's say that we have decentralized storage, and I can store an HTML page somewhere, okay? Thanks to some particular mechanics, I know which is the small group of nodes that have the page saved, because I don't know, by the name or the hash, or automatically I know which are the nodes in the registry that have this page. So I can go to their IP address, one of them, and get this page. I can go to and make sure that the page is correct or is broken up, and visualize it in my browser. Okay? Sure. So this is the basic concept, and you have a sort of decentralized storage, but it's actually open to everybody, like the internet is open, so we can work out to this. If each node has a PHP installed, you can even save a PHP page that elaborates some data, but it becomes, I know where you're going, and I agree with you, and here is a small problem, but can be solved, but they need to be in a sandbox, because PHP can also format your hard drive if you code it properly. But you start having a more intelligent sort of HTML page. Now you need to close them inside a website, a domain name. So what we need is a decentralized DNS, which is a very simple solution in our terms. It's just an object with URL. Then every browser can install a small plugin that when you do .bcz in a domain, automatically is go get it through the blockchain and not through the regular DNS. Even though in my dream we bought the TLD.bcz. So we had the .bcz purchased in the normal DNS system, but every request that was to .bcz was automatically fished from the blockchain. So we were tricking the DNS system in believing that they were normal IP addresses. Now, coming to IP addresses, I was thinking how you find the correct set of files that belong to a website in a decentralized storage. The addresses should be like a sort of IPv6, where, and in fact in my dream, we were buying a subset of IPv6 that would cover unlimited quantity, because like you just take the last 3 blocks of the IPv6 and you have a huge quantity of potential website. So our DNS will point to that. IPv6 IP addresses in the internet, once you get to a particular subset, you are in a particular data center, if you want, right? And our data center was the blockchain. So we were actually giving pretend real IPv6 addresses to subset of the distributed storage of our blockchain. Okay. Now, with the classic mechanic of the algorithm that we use, we can create a space, like a folder, a directory, a container, that is addressed specifically with one ending part of IPv6. Or we can make IPv12 if you want, you know what? Adding one more things to our own gateway to the blockchain to make it look like normal. In this way, if somebody is pulling an IPv12 if you want, we know which is the folder cryptographically that match what file in the distributed storage are included in this specific part, okay? And this was the next step. The domain name system decentralized as well, where people register it as an object, a blockchain object with a specific characteristic. So people query it and find the IPv6, find the folder. The browser plugin search for the index.htm or index.php or whatever it is, emulating a web server client side, not
okay.
This for HTML. So you're gonna get an outcome. It is a limited things that you can do, but we can still elaborate because that's what was coming from my brain. The rendering is the client side. Server side, the node provider can do a minimum sort of elaboration. So there should be like an SQLite, minimum things, PHP interpreter. Now, my point was this, because how you control the overload and things and where these things are managed. That's why I wanted to move browser plugin, or we can create our special browser, even though it would be much better that people can navigate with Chrome or Safari or the regular ones. It's easier to download the full set, so you download the database, you download the PHP pages and elaborate everything locally for the result. Obviously you're giving away the full content of a potential website, so you cannot do things with username and passwords and things. But we can avoid them by going through digital signatures anyway. And the subset of data can be encrypted if I want to make a website accessible by somebody specifically or by a subset of people. The plugin, which we're already working on as a sort of wallet plugin, take the full bunch of things, has the decryption key, and execute the website locally in my browser. So, that's...
So I have a few thoughts on this,
okay.
And this, a lot of them you've touched on a little bit, but I elaborate just for my sanity. So when we're talking about hosting a complicated web application like F***,
sorry, a small parenthesis, the heavy file, like embedded large picture and video, were coming from centralized storage. So
okay,
we only had the wireframe in the...
So, even so we still have... So we have a couple of different problems. One of them is static file storage, which you talked about, and I think we can support quite easily, which is this things like your HTML files. Another one, another kind of storage is this more dynamic memory, so the things somebody would use like a SQL database for. And that's a little bit of a trickiness. is how you actually keep, say, something like a SQL database in sync between any different node that could be the server in a particular application. The other two resources we're trying to manage, which you mentioned at least briefly, are bandwidth. So maybe we have a node that actually stores this file, but that node isn't equipped to serve the file 100,000 times per minute for a popular site. And a fourth one is compute. So like if you talk about a PHP server, for example, maybe some of the jobs the PHP server has to do are actually quite computationally intensive, processing streams of notifications or processing things. So
we have
quite a stack of things that and
static files.
I'd say like a
files that change. Okay.
Yeah. So like dynamic files. Or
okay.
Database.
Dynamic file is good.
Or database.
Well, it can be many things. You can write on a piece of text. So then make files. Then we have bandwidth.
So how you serve it. And compute. Like
Elaboration, data calculation, computation.
For example, if I upload a picture on Facebook, the very first thing Facebook does is to resize it. So if I upload a 2 megabytes photo, then it scales it down. Maybe after that, Facebook does some specific jobs. It tries to look for faces it recognizes. There's several compute tasks that maybe it hashes the file and tries to compare it to a list of illegal files. So these are each things that we would have to, if we want people to be able to build anything beyond the level of, say, like a toy applications, that we have to come up with some strategy for them to do in our system.
Sure. Obviously, that was the first step. True, static files shouldn't be an issue, right?
That one we already have a kind of an idea for how we do.
So that should be
checkbox. Yeah.
Dynamic files, that's an actual problem. So, probably, but I'm just talking crap now, I'm brainstorming.
Yeah.
As there is a decentralized storage, decentralized computing, is there decentralized RAM? Can every machine has a RAM drive they become a collective faster swap memory?
Well, I think to me the difficulty there comes down to, say, we use blockchain in the first place because we're concerned about trust, right? Any person can join this network. Any person could wind up hosting a chunk of the thing. So it's about how do we guarantee the right privileges to the
first of all
to
deposit and save data, you go through a transaction. So if I want to save an HTML file in this decentralized, I need to post a blockchain transaction with a fee, the taxation on the file, etc., like anything else. So
let's say we're building Zoobook, for example. Now every time I make a post on the page, is that going to be a transaction?
Wait, exactly. That's why I'm saying so. One step per time, before planning to climb the Everest, let's, the sand hill, exactly. So, in the moment that people post, they need to pay for internet storage. So, pretty much, that's nothing different than taking a server from one of the provider where you save your website, okay? So that is solved. The fact that one server needs to deliver 1 million times, I think there should be a sort of caching system. Where you query it from. But this is something, come on, any server in the internet provides an HTML file. It shouldn't be a big deal, even if he has to give it 1 million times. It's not a calculated request, it's just a delivery. I don't know if
sure can. It might not be the largest problem until you hit very, very high traffic scale.
Probably we can also calculate how many requests there are and increase the amount of nodes that hold the copy of the file.
Consider, for example, that for a modern single page application, the actual what you consider the static components of the page, so the HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. That chunk can get to be pretty big. It can be a couple megabytes because you have a whole application, and that's without images or whatever else. Because you have a whole application coded that you're delivering to the browser in one shot.
Either we need to work well on the decentralized storage mechanics, which means that the request sent is just for an address, a file. How is delivered back to you is elaborated separately. Meaning that, let's say I have the domain name.
Send a request, I would like this file sent to this location. The network goes and does its job, and eventually somebody sends a file.
Exactly, correct. And this is made in such a way that you load balance between all the nodes. When something is very high, load balance is distributed. So there will be a protocol on file storage that will pretty much solve this thing a little bit.
Well, as long as the network itself has bandwidth to support all the sites that people are browsing on.
And the internet has it, right?
Internet has it. Whether there's enough ZooBC nodes that have it.
Well, if there is a lot of demand, if these people somehow get a reputation score and get rewards for serving the files,
it's something that's not elaborated in the current proof of participation.
No, obviously because this is new. So,
but something we can think towards, exactly.
So the money that people pay to store the file to be served, the decentralized, go distributed on who serve the files. Is a mix, half who store and who serve the files, who store and serve the files.
Potentially, yeah. You know, you could
or maybe like any internet story. If you take a server from somewhere and at a certain point your website becomes super important, you need to pay more for data traffic.
Yeah, potentially. You mean like put more fee on the blockchain? Like maybe there's a certain number of times your application can serve a page.
Okay.
We run into challenges we have to solve to how we prevent the system from being abused, essentially. So like if you're selling a product and I want to take down your website, now I can just go and browse to your website 50 times and exhaust your credit on the blockchain.
The plugin should cache it locally. So
but if I'm a hacker, I can force it to not use the cache, right? I can spoof my IP address and get it.
You did also servers in the internet anyway.
Sure.
But let's say
I sound very negative, but it's only because I want a very tight solution if we're gonna proceed.
So it's not really a check, but it's a shaky check.
Shaky check.
Now this was not even in the dynamic files.
We're talking about bandwidth.
We're talking about bandwidth.
Yeah. So
anyway, it's a problem to fight in the moment that
there's too much.
There is the problem, but at the same time is to be considered how probably centralized servers that do a proxy, they validate that
potentially can, yeah. So if somebody trusts the centralized server to sit in the middle,
well, it can be more than one. You can do ping a different cost.
If it were one, then. And this almost comes full circle to the point of being stupid, but so like if I really care about serving my website, then I could pay for a centralized server that proxies the files from the.
No, it's different because this gives full anonymity, gives impossibility from taking down, it gives a lot of more advantages. Yeah. Even if they take down the centralized proxy, there are another 10 set up around, you know, like
set up block flare.
Now the dynamic files, that's more important.
And it's quite tricky, yeah.
And if we don't want to really compete with an actual web server, then you can get the plugin to do the calculation. So it's client side.
Yeah.
You download the full database, you download the things.
I think it's good. It's quite a big chunk to bite. But you started with the example of a decentralized social network, and I think it's good to analyze what we want to do in those terms, else we fall short of the goal.
No, but that's one step. Everything progresses, you know, like if you don't succeed with the first step, you are demotivated in trying the second step. But
because to me, that's the challenge that I run into about how to architect this thing is say, without making, because the ideal here would be to have a certain degree of privacy along with, you know, whatever you're doing. So there's a kind of a hybrid, and this is what makes it a decentralized application rather than just a blockchain application. It's because it's not that every post you make and every picture can go in plain text on the blockchain, because the scale doesn't work, the privacy doesn't work, things like that. But there could be some way to piggyback a decentralized application off of the, you know, say say how you make it so that only the records relevant to a certain person are shown to a certain other people, which becomes a scalability solution in itself. In the moment that I don't have to see the posts from a million different people, but I have a feed where I know a couple of computers that I have to query, then that can actually serve as a scalability solution at the same time.
They kind of remind me some friends of ours that had this silly idea of the human.
Yeah. Better we don't mention them.
But no, but in a certain way, you go to the point where then each person that participates need to run a node at this point. And you serve only people that look your own thing. You post locally.
This is a thing, that I didn't quite like either, and it's complex because, say, when I had thought about this problem a few years ago, the way I pictured it was, I think the idea that everybody who wants to use Facebook is going to run a Facebook server is insane. It's never going to happen. So surely there has to be a middle layer, more like a IRC, where people can volunteer to run servers for the application, and you can connect to a particular server that you use.
But this is already there. There is the social network that runs exactly like this.
Like Diaspora.
I think that there is shit, right?
I'm not super familiar with it, but I should get more familiar with it.
Besides, it's full of because obviously when you have this
when you have zero protocol for removing speech, that's shit.
People the each server is maintained by its own server moderator that can moderate and remove things, but obviously it's one man against 1,000 the post crap and it's crap. This is why if you pay to post, like we go back to the idea that if you have to pay 25 cents every mail that you send, there wouldn't be so much spam, right? In fact, some core services, email, mail server, decentralized mail server, database, decentralized database. Well, the blockchain after all is a decentralized database, but this is in a different terms because you update data.
Yeah, the biggest difference is in terms of like a write throughput,
So you can use the blockchain to handle and manage the processes on the decentralized database, which
potentially it depends. Like I don't know. Say for example, how much of the appeal of Facebook is that you can have a conversation with somebody back and forth like in real time, and how much of that if each comment has to wait for blocks? That's not too bad.
No, but also because
it's not too bad.
Probably.
It's more the scale of how many comments could you fit in a block for the whole system. You
wouldn't feel comment in a block, I think. Probably we need to remove from the central at this point, place a lot of things and leave them on the client side. For example, all the conversations or things that are seen by two people and not.
So a chat goes browser to browser practically. Which I think isn't okay. I think that's the kind of thing that a lot of people would be into as we get more privacy minded. I mean, the one place central servers got popular in chat is that people show up they expect to have their chat history, And so if you get on a different device, you don't have your chat history.
Yeah, you can save your encrypted things in Google Drive and then re-download it from there.
Yeah, maybe if you want to. So each person keeps a local chat history, for example, and you do serverless chat.
Or you start distributing comments only to those that need to see them.
Yeah.
People can even leverage their own Google Drive as storage space for the. So you leave the wireframe in the centralized system, and the content you
put outside. And that's the other. This takes us kind of full circle again, but the really simple solution to this problem. Let's say I have a decentralized app that runs on the blockchain to manage certain important user actions like registrations and making new posts and buying credits, whatever this is.
Distributing the decryption keys.
You could take the database itself and do a cloud-hosted database that's administrated by a person. It just kind of violates the ethos of, and you could have each node connect to that database to check the state of reality. It just kind of violates the spirit of the blockchain decentralized way.
I think that the picture, either you see it or you don't see it, right? Once you know which is the hash of the picture, if what is served to you is wrong, you just don't
You
have
can
the
prove.
picture.
Yeah.
Okay. The result of a query is different.
Because you don't know the result of the query to compare the hash.
So those things should be guaranteed by the blockchain, and those things that are just either there or not.
Yeah. Yeah, so basically that should be the limited set of, if I already know the hash, it's okay for it to go in any kind of whatever
correct,
storage.
exactly.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Because then that storage can be replicated or whatever. And like you said, worst case scenario, you don't get it. It's not hosted when you want it.
Database.
And that comes back to the compute. Is the
yeah.
So
What is database and computation? Computation, you move as much as you can client side again. Okay. So you provide the information for which the result either are those or are not. Okay. Pre-computation somebody else did. So depends on the application that you do, because if we're talking about decentralized social network, then there are some particular computation. If it's a dating site, there are different kinds of computation, but it all boils down to database queries pretty much, and very little analysis of data. So
I give an example of what I mean here related to a social network. So let's say your social network has a certain feed where it needs to that you check, where you need to see a certain set of posts, right? Now you have a collection of friends, and each of these friends has a certain number of posts, and each of those posts has a certain number of likes or reactions, a certain number of comments. Each one has a certain age. Each one maybe has some kind of content tags criteria that it knows you're interested in or not. Something has to prepare for me based on this collection the list of posts that I actually see. And that's a compute task to go through and scan these other pieces of information and arrange them somehow that would be meaningful to me.
I think
So
you
know
know
where this compute happens.
client side.
So for it to happen client side, all of that data has to be served to the client
No.
at first, right?
After. Let's try to think something like if you have going back to the previous example, right? If you know what you want, you ask for what you want. Then it can be there or not, but you ask for what you want. So you have a container with all the information, which are indexed in a particular way. So with even just a file name where each character represents something, I don't know. So you can ask all the files that have that match a specific pattern. Automatically that builds your timeline or your matches to. I think that if data is there, is encrypted.
Sure.
And the blockchain just distributes decryption keys to specific files.
This may be a reason that it has to be done client-side for security in the first place. So I'm with you in the sense that, say, for example, if each of these posts with all these pieces of information is some kind of little encrypted blob that maybe doesn't have the full text or the full image or whatever, it's just some metadata about the post that it's going to use to try to organize them. Maybe my client has to download all these encrypted blobs because my client is the only one that has the decryption key to even make sense of these data to then sort them and present them to me a certain way.
Correct. But which are the blobs to download, you can pre-calculate by the fact that the file names have a particular set of...
Or even that they've, you download the set of blobs that have been encrypted to your public key.
No, because they need to use a decryption key because there are multiple people that can see the same piece of things.
True. Yeah.
So you are just given the decryption key that... So you have access to the decryption key that you are supposedly able to see. So if I write a comment and I share it with 3 people, then these 3 people have the decryption key for the comment, which is delivered to them encrypted with their public key.
Okay.
And so it is a relationship client to client, browser to browser directly when it comes to what is the material and what is the decryption.
And of course, this is a problem you and I have discussed at length, but just for the benefit of the camera, that's obviously once a thing has been decrypted and that person decides to share it everywhere, there's nothing you can do. So it hardly matters whether the post content itself leaks or if the decryption key
We
leaks.
cannot do
As soon as it goes
anything
out,
about it. Absolutely.
the best we can do is to rotate each new content with new decryption
Absolutely,
keys,
yes.
so that you have so that it's not sufficient that somebody who shares this decryption key from the past now can see everything.
Now each piece has its own key.
Yeah.
Which you can get from the other guy that shared with you and say, I have a piece of content, when I share with somebody else, I send you the pointer to the content and the
Correct,
decryption key.
Yeah.
And this is off-chain, obviously.
Yeah. In fact, I think a lot of this has to be off-chain in order for it to be performant.
This is the case of a social network. If it's a dating site or
and I picked that example specifically because it's hard.
Absolutely.
In part because it forces us to think about all of these different aspects in detail.
So when it comes to database, or it should be just the indexing part?
Let's say like which post from which person.
Yeah, exactly. To who, to what, so you can get, let's say you're offline.
Yeah.
I do something that can be shared with you.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere must be written that you can pull for those things. So when you connect,
so say for example that we're satisfied to run at the speed of the blockchain, right? Like say like 15-second, 30-second blocks, whatever it is. Imagine that as I'm sitting here using this social network browser, each action that I do, so I make a post, I take a comment, I make a like, blah blah blah. Each of these actions goes into a kind of a data structure. And at the end, I compute a Merkle root of these actions, and I post that Merkle root on the blockchain that summarizes all of the recent actions that I've taken on the blockchain. Then somebody else trying to interpret, say, when they're served, and these can include, hashes of files that I've uploaded or that I've declared exist on storage with decryption keys, or, maybe I don't give the decryption key, I give the hash of the decryption key or something like this. Or at least the hash of the content, I don't know. But so actually serving the decryption keys to other people can be something that happens off chain. So just peer to peer. It's like the peers understand which guy gets which decryption key, and obviously the peer itself should never have the decryption keys in plain. They should all be encrypted on one person's computer, on one person's client, for another person's client, passed through the peer. And then, or stored in the peer and then encrypted form, and then they can be queried by the other computer to get the decryption key. So maybe that can start to serve as an index. Like if I go back,
exactly.
So somewhere out here we have dynamic files or maybe even static files that get recorded of these sets of actions that can be larger.
Yeah, correct.
The blockchain is used to prove that a particular person took a particular set of actions, and to point to which files give the details of those actions. And then if I want to reconstruct the feed, I can go and query for the specific static files that are created.
Cost a fee every time.
It's 12 hours.
True. But I don't know how you get around that in the blockchain. Say the reason that Facebook doesn't charge you a fee to use it is because they sell all of your data to advertisers. They make.
So there can
more
be an
data.
incentive, a reverse incentive to people to earn something that automatically pay off. Sort of take and give. You can have a balance going up. So much you gave, so much you taken, and then you need to keep it balanced out.
Maybe, yeah.
Obviously, if this thing goes on, there will be interest people to advertise, and I don't say that advertising shouldn't be there.
And of course, you can, maybe you can. The things cost a fee, but you can trickle coins to everybody in the ecosystem. So the fee serves less like a cost that you have to pay, and it serves more like a rate limit.
And related to content, because if there is total free speech, people can start posting disgusting stuff.
Yeah.
But if this really doesn't expose you to unknown people.
In principle, only the people who you subscribe to, you're going to see stuff
correct.
from. When somebody starts posting the CP or whatever, you just
block them, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's better because at least you are connected with people that you mean to be connected.
And then those files are only saved in encrypted form on some computers that say everybody else has given up access to. Say they're encrypted by a key that's put up there, and nobody has the key because nobody's subscribed.
Yeah, correct.
So then, what damage does it do?
Correct. is a basic.
It's a possibility. Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that version 2 is going to be something that we can put. Just making an HTML file only. They use images from outside, and the DNS system will be a success to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And of course, all this brainstorming isn't part of our. And ultimately, for the ZooBC version 2, we'd like to generalize the solutions to these problems.
Absolutely.
So that we can imagine something like a social network or a dating site or
There's
several
gonna be
other
version
type of
5,
applications
but
that you could literally browse to with like the browser plugin or the special application. You feel like you're using a website, but it's actually running directly on the backbone of the blockchain.
Correct. But if in version 2 people has the ability to save an HTML file, and people can visualize the HTML file in their browser going through
That's a start.
domain, that would be already fantastic. That's
So I guess we plan to add one per version.
yeah. But,
No,
I think at the beginning we can even come to compromises where part of things are done centralized. Okay,
Sure, yeah.
just and then slowly move.
Well, in fact, I think that's one of the areas that we really should explore, because this is, to me, this is one of the areas where where decentralized apps and smart contracts have failed a little bit, which is that they do give you the power to build a decentralized application, but you're locked only into the set of tools and things that can be done purely on a decentralized network. And for some reasons, including scale, including privacy, including control of data, for some kinds of applications, that's not the only thing you need. So one of the big things that's missing, and I understand people are working to address it, but we haven't seen something we think is a kick-ass way to address it yet, is the proper way to bridge, to give somebody the ability to delineate the line between here's the decentralized part and what it guarantees, here's the centralized part that makes no guarantees, here's what the communication, the bridge between these two parts is, and let a user make a decision on what apps they want to trust or use based on.
Yeah, the decentralized part contain a wireframe, the centralized part contain the content, but the content, if it's not the correct one, doesn't appear in the wireframe.
Like
the user inside has the key to decrypt the decentralized.
In Ethereum, this concept is called like an oracle, I think.
It's different. The oracle is
different.
just something that can be queried in order to have an event action. Not even an event because they don't have events,
So it's moving in the same direction, but it's a very limited form of what we're talking about. We'd really like to build hybrid applications.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely.
And not only hybrid applications that are partly computed on the blockchain and partly computed on the private server, but ideally also that are partly computed on the client.
Exactly. That's the key part, yes. And all working with cryptography.
Yeah, exactly. So it's to
and
structure an
security.
application that knows which things to do on your client side, which things need to happen in the node, which things need to happen in private in the cloud.
Think simply. From the blockchain, I get the wireframe of the page that tells this picture needs to match this hash. This picture needs to match this hash. And this is where you can get it. It doesn't match the hash, the plugin doesn't.
The browser
show you
understands
exactly there is the
picture,
wrong picture. So you remove any possible. On the other hand, people know that you're watching the page because you're gonna get the content from a centralized source.
Yeah, exactly.
You can even turn it off or proxy through Tor or probably the centralized server should be in Tor. So the plugin will get the content from Tor to the Onion network.
Of course, you at least obscure the IP addresses for the requesters. To me, I'm in favor of even leaving that layer up to the application developer themselves. I think really the way I see it is that, and this is kind of a software philosophy thing. I see a good software platform as something that gives you the tools to make the cool things you want to do easy, and doesn't stand in your way to force you from doing the things it thinks you shouldn't.
At the same time, that the people implement this out, sometimes very stupid.
There's sometimes that's true, and that's the very Apple approach to it. Is that you make it impossible for somebody to do the thing stupid so that it doesn't negatively affect your brand. But I'm not sure if I'm convinced of that opinion. I have a lot of faith in the wisdom of the crowd to pick the couple of things. So let's make it possible for people to implement stupid stuff, but let's make it easy for people to identify which ones are the ones people understand are trustworthy or understand are done in a good way. And those ones are made by intelligent people who know how to make the best of the tools that we give them. That's my philosophy.
Amazing. I think that as first experiment.
A little taste of our brains.
Exactly.